All right, so let's call this meeting to order. We are the August 12th, 2020 CPC meeting. Obviously, remote meeting continuing and a little bit of technical difficulties. If anybody's trying to communicate or connect with us and they're not able to do that, our apologies. We'll do the best we can. So we have a meeting agenda, and we have a lot of guests and invitees, applicants. So we want to try and accommodate your schedules as best we can too. We may look to move some agenda items around to try to do that. So we have an agenda item number 1, which is review of June 10th and July 8th meeting minutes. Meg, you sent those a little earlier today. I don't know if members have had a chance to review either of those meeting minutes and have any comments, or whether there's a desire to table those minutes and revisit them at our next meeting. What's generally the will of the committee on agenda item number 1?
Well, I have read them. I have unfortunately lost the small technical correction I had on the second set of minutes. It was just a language thing. So, but I was happy with both sets. If we have more discussion than that, then maybe we should just move it to the end of the meeting to accommodate our guests.
Does anybody else have any comments have you had a chance to review the meeting minutes, and do you have any comments on what you've seen? Or do we want to make a motion and approve them?
I miss the Lane Pluta, my notes purveyor, who always had 8 million things for me to change.
Right. And welcome, Rick, reminding me Elaine's not here. Welcome, Rick, a new member. And thank you for agreeing to participate in this committee.
Rick, have you joined the committee?
I did. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So does anybody else have any comments on the meeting minutes, or are we more comfortable tabling that at this point?
No, I would vote to approve them, except that I did have one little technical correction, and it was purely technical, and I promise it doesn't change the meaning of anything. So if we want to vote to approve them, and if I remember what it is or can find it again, I will run it by Meg. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. Thank you.
Anyone against the minutes?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
And Meg, if I'm not back to you within 24 hours, just kick me under the table, as it were.
You got it.
Our second agenda item is applications for under our emergency application process allowed by the regulations for housing assistance. There were 2 applications, Valley Opportunity Council and 1 Holyoke CDC. Michael, you and I had a conversation. So I think maybe the way to proceed is to ask Michael and Stephen to, just give us a brief summary of the status, and then Stephen, you sent a revised application, and I don't know. I've had a chance to review it. I don't know if other committee members have, and whether we'll be in a position to take any action on it. But Michael, since I think you're going to be more brief than Stephen, how about if we invite you to go first?
Okay, I'm trying. Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think I can kind of expedite things a little bit. There won't be a competing application. We had put in a companion application when I submitted what you saw to the Office of Community Development for some CBG Community Development Block Grant funding. And Valley Opportunity Council had done the same. Valley Opportunity Council was awarded funds and we were not. It's my position that those were companion for a reason. There's an inefficiency in trying to set up two programs from two different pots of the same city's money. And therefore, I would not move forward with this application, but would rather heartily endorse the Valley Opportunity Council application because there is some administrative overhead and cost involved in creating these kind of programs, and so duplicating that effort is just not in the city's interest and would not maximize the resources for the households who need it. So we will graciously bow out at this point, but I'm happy to talk to you about why I feel there is a continuing likelihood that the need for this will be real and could make a big difference in a lot of people's lives.
Thank you. Alicia, I haven't forgotten about you. And I wonder whether you would prefer to speak now or to hear Stephen's update. And so really, since you're joining us, and this is probably, you may only want to participate for this level, I would extend you the courtesy of deciding. So I've got to, so Alicia's saying she's muted, defer to Steve on the chat room there. So let's do that. Let's go, Stephen, why don't you go, and then Amy, you can try to get Alicia.
Yeah, I've unmuted her. Okay.
I'm happy once Steve has gone over his program, I'm happy to sort of fill in where we're at with the CDBG COVID funds and what we're seeing as need in the community.
That would be great. So Stephen, any other committee members want to weigh in at this point, or should we turn it over to Stephen and let him go?
No, I think we should hear from Stephen.
All right, go ahead, Stephen. Thank you for your application update, by the way.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me again. So, I think last we spoke was, I don't know that I presented in the July meeting. I think it was the June meeting. And last we spoke, there was a lot of uncertainty about where all this was going and what was happening. And I sit before you today with similar uncertainty. We believe unemployment has been extended, but that may be challenged, et cetera, et cetera. The bonus unemployment for folks. So those that were receiving 600 may receive 400 additional dollars. So there's these lifelines that last I saw, and again, I may be a couple of days behind on this, I apologize, but last I saw, it isn't certain to go through, but it was close. So that would be a big help for folks who are living right on the fringe. Some newer developments to think about are if schools go remote, which is what the rumors are, but nothing's been made official, then what does that mean for folks' ability to continue working and taking a potential COVID leave of absence, depending on the size of their employer and all the angles of that. The COVID leave of absence is 2/3 pay, similar to traditional unemployment. So really there's a question mark about where that is and how that's going to move forward with residents. We have been awarded some funds, very generous amount of funds from the Community Development Block Grant pot. We're layering that in. We also have been awarded some foundation money that we're actually spending now for emergencies that we're coming across now. Folks to really help stabilize and leverage that money to get them, if career is essentially obsolete now, we want to get them on track with something new quickly. So while they're going through unemployment, while everything's going, we want them to get trained in an area and get positioned in an area where they will again become a marketable employee. And I'm intentionally talking vague there because we don't know what fields are becoming obsolete and not obsolete. Some studies show retail is becoming obsolete, and that's a big uphill for a lot of our participants. A load of our participants work at the Holyoke Mall and places similar to that in and around the city and neighboring city. Yeah. so many unknowns. It's hard to really, get your arms around everything you're thinking. Our program is in big picture. We received some COVID community service block grant money. That's what we get as a community action agency. And that's what we're using to staff our program. So all the money we're applying for from the other sources, including PPA, including CDBG, and including some foundations, including FEMA, is all for direct support money for clients, for eligible clients. And unfortunately, the eligibility for everybody is a little bit different, and how we want to spend it is a little bit different. So there's a bit of a matrix. But the one thing I know, the last thing I will close on, and I'd love to hear any questions you have, is the CPA money will absolutely be the last money into any family when all else fails.
Yeah.
I could envision the CPA money helping, the residents of Churchill that were first-time homeowners and lost their jobs, or their income was disrupted in some way because of COVID, and maybe the CDBG isn't quite the right fit for them. And again, this is a lot of maybe. There isn't a whole lot of, we haven't worked out all the programming details of CDBG or any of the other, or CDBG in particular, and how these will work together. But I would see CDBG being, out first, and this would come in for those that either CDBG runs out or that maybe on some sort of technicality don't qualify for CDBG. Really, the bottom line is we know, and we're very grateful, organizationally, we're very grateful of the support we've received from the CPA Committee for Development of Affordable Housing and Historic Preservation. So we want to make sure that this really sparse resource is leveraged as far as it can. And this is the last piece of information I didn't write down, but the last time we spoke, there was the courts were going to reopen and evictions were going to start in August. That has been extended for October, and it's likely to be extended beyond that, from just the way the tea leaves are pointing. So we still are talking to landlords and trying to figure out what's out there for need. But the reality is, without the threat of the court, folks that aren't paying rent may be able to pay rent, and we have no way of knowing that they're just not putting the money away or they're having income disruptions. So sorry, I covered a lot of ground.
That was very helpful. So I just want to make sure of one thing, and that is, it doesn't sound to me like you need any immediate action from the committee today, but I do want to tell you that, and if I'm wrong, is he unmuted? Can you unmute Steve and Amy?
I never muted him, but I've just asked.
I muted myself. It's a habit. After I stop talking, I mute myself to let everybody. I apologize.
I don't know why you can't unmute yourself, but so Stephen, my question, I just want to make sure you don't, it seems like we still have some time. You don't need us to take immediate action to provide housing assistance to people at this meeting. And
no.
And I will tell you, I mean, I think if that were to change before our next regularly scheduled meeting, we would likely be able to convene a special meeting to deal with something like that. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it would be prudent to table it a month and see where we are. And I'd be happy to suggest in September, presuming you meet in September.
Okay.
We
if
do.
Your next meeting's February, then maybe I oughta go back to my work. But if you seem to be meeting heartily every month, which is rare to get both the July and an August meeting. So kudos to you folks.
So if I can just ask,
go ahead.
Clarity. Do I understand that probably the additional information that's going to come in over the next, however long it is going to help design the program so that the funds are used in the most efficient way? So in a way, it would be premature to move now because you don't know what you're going to be responding to until we're closer to the point where you need it.
Yes, that's another angle to look at it. That's absolutely true.
Okay. So we don't need to be down in the weeds trying to figure out details yet either.
We're not quite there yet.
Okay, great.
We're still trying to figure out. We're still trying to figure out what the world's going to look like in January, what the city of Holyoke is going to look like in January, or September, and with public schools and people's ability to work and pay bills, etc.
Yeah, no, it's a changing landscape every day.
Any other committee members have any comments or questions for Stephen? Go ahead, Meg. Go ahead, Meg.
Sorry, I had to be. Amy has to unmute me every time. It is official that the schools are moving to a remote open. So that's just something I wanted to put on the record, that was announced this afternoon. So for sure, I'm grateful that you're starting to think about that reality and how that might have a very unique impact on families with children as they're trying to figure out how to maintain working and also schooling their children. So thank you for thinking of that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I haven't looked anywhere. I've had my kind of head down all afternoon trying to get through a handful of things. So thank you for sharing that.
Anybody else? Any other committee members have any comments or questions?
If there's anything Alicia wants to tell us.
Right, I was going to ask Alicia if she didn't want to now give us a quick update.
Question about landlords too.
I'm struggling a little bit with whether to extend that question to the general public. But let's start with Alicia. You want to give us some of your thoughts on where we are and how important having access to community preservation monies for housing assistance in general, and then if you have comments on Stephen's presentation, I'd welcome those too.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you all tonight. Nice to see that things are still moving along. So VOC was awarded $246,941 in CDBG COVID funds. So these are community development block grant funds that came to the city specifically to respond to address COVID needs. And we did a round of applications back in the spring, and the awards came out about a month ago. And then our funding from HUD has finally arrived here in the city. Based on the application that was submitted by VOC, that funding would help, and Steve, correct me if things have changed here, but that funding at that time would help 98 households with approximately $2,500 a piece. Now, I think there's some key pieces of the CDBG CV program that you all should be aware of that may change sort of your approach tonight. One of them is that we're working on 80% median income, where I believe your CPA funds can go to 100% median income. So we're serving a lower income household than the CPA program would be able to do. The next point is that the CDBG funds cannot be used for rent arrearages. And this is of concern to me for a household that perhaps lost their job in March and has not gone back to work. And so now they have potentially not paid their rent March, April, May, June, July, August. We would hope that we'd have the CDBG CV funds ready to roll with Steve for September's rent, and they would get September, October, November. We can only do 3 months worth of rent for a household, up to 3 months worth of rent. So my concern is when evictions are able to move forward, what's going to happen with these households that have not paid their rent from March to August? And is that something the CPA funds are able to do, is to address some of the arrearages? Again, we can only do 3 months worth of assistance with the CDBG funds. And then finally, the other piece that we all need to be very careful of is what's known as duplication of benefits. HUD is watching us, so our funds come from HUD, and they're watching very closely to ensure that households aren't receiving a duplication of benefits, that CPA money and CDBG money and FEMA money and other money are all going to the same household for the same month. And part of the duplication of benefits we're able to avoid that issue is because the landlords are paid directly. We are not providing funding to the tenants or to the property owners. The money is going to either the landlord or the bank directly. But I'm not sure if any of those issues would impact your decisions around CPA funds, the income limits, the arrearages, and the 3 months only.
So what you're saying is that CDGB funds, is that the same as HUD? When you say HUD?
So HUD is the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's the federal agency that sends us the money. And then the money is in a program called the Community Development Block Grant Program. And then they tacked on CV for COVID as a designation for these particular funds that came to the city.
We can only use
CDGB CD.
So we CV as in COVID. So we get CDBG funds every single year.
Yeah.
We get about $1.5 million every year that we use in the city. And then on top of our regular money that we got about 780,000, 750,000 in CDBG CV funds to be used only for the pandemic.
Okay.
And it can be used for rental assistance moving forward once the program is set up, say in September, but it can only be used for 3 months consecutively or in total?
In total. So I think from an accounting point of view, Steve would probably prefer that it's 3 consecutive months, but maybe you have a household that comes in and they only need a month. We also are able to use those funds for mortgage payments. And so we may have families who we would never have met or seen before, maybe families in the Smithsbury neighborhood, certainly Churchill, the Highlands, that we may not have ever been able to meet their needs, but now because of job loss, they're certainly entitled to funds.
It can't be used in the rear, correct?
It cannot be used for arrearage.
Okay.
But CPC money could be used. So what you're saying is that if we get to a point where the eviction moratorium is ended, at that point you would see a lot of people that would be struggling, and this funding could be used for them.
I don't know the legalities of the CPA funds and whether or not you could use it for arrearages.
Okay, that's a really good question that we should get some answers.
I mean, one of the wonderful things about CPA is there's tremendous flexibility. I can't imagine that we can't use it for that. So I could be wrong, and someone may come up with a legal opinion, but common sense tells me that we probably can. And you know something different than?
Well, I know I have a good contact at the Mass Housing Partnership that I can consult. And I know that 3 months, I think that sounds familiar as to what she said. And I do remember her saying that she didn't think that, she did say that it's up to I believe she said that it's up to the committee what they want to decide, but that most CPA communities are making this specific to COVID-19 issues. So I have to ask her about the arrearages, but I would think if it started in March, that does could relate to COVID-19 and people's loss of income. So that's a good question for her.
My other question, this is just logistics. I'm trying to make sure I have all the acronyms correct in my mind and I'm not duplicating things. So I've heard people talk about Raft money, but also FEMA. Is that the same thing when someone says, okay?
So Raft funding is funding that is, it's rapid assistance for tenants. And it is a state program. And in our area, it's administered by Wayfinders. And it's a program that gets an infusion of state funds periodically, depending on need. There has been a recent infusion of funds. Steve, are you guys doing Raft as well, or is it just Wayfinders?
Only Wayfinders, but we have a contact inside that will help us make sure we're not duplicating with them.
To make sure, and to make sure we're navigating. Raft income limits, I believe, tend to be a little lower than both CDBG and the CPA funds. They tend to work with families that are literally standing on the sidewalk with their suitcases. I can tell you that at the end of June, so there was an influx of cash in June to address COVID issues. And at the end of June, there were 163 applications from Holyoke to Wayfinders for Raft assistance at that point in time. We don't have a current number as of tonight, but that was at the end of June.
Did you say, Alicia, that when Meg asked that Raft is separate from FEMA then?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So there may also be FEMA money and MEMA money going to agencies like Steve's or Wayfinders, and that comes directly from either FEMA or MEMA. For instance, MEMA was using FEMA money. So MEMA is the Massachusetts Emergency Management. FEMA, of course, is Federal Emergency Management. A lot of times the federal dollars trickle down to the state level. And for instance, the state level was using federal funding to put COVID positive homeless persons in hotels. And so that was MEMA taking that action with federal dollars. And one of the things that's key with Steve is, and a matrix is a great way to describe it, is he'll have a grid with all of the programs listed and then all of the different qualifiers, so that when a client comes in, they can quickly do an assessment that, oh, your income level is here, so you're ruled out of this program and this program, but your income level falls within this area, we can put you in this program. So it's really like having a menu of the programs that are available and then doing a best fit for that client.
Anybody else have a question? Steve, you have something you want to say?
Just to follow up a little bit with what Alicia said, and it was absolutely correct and great. Just to put some context to 100% versus 80% versus 60% of income for a family of four. You know, she and I live this every day, but you folks may not know. So 100% AMI for a family of four is $77,200. So the idea for those higher income households are, maybe there is rent arrearage, but they're in a financial place where they ought to be able to help dig themselves out. We're talking about folks with means and with often quality jobs to get to a family of four making that sort of income. You drop down to 60%, and I put it all right here, and I didn't put it in the right order.
You said 77,000 and what, Stephen?
Crap, now I'm gonna go back.
200.
77.2, yes.
Thank you.
Where is 60%? Here it is. So 60% is, where are we? 60% is 51,240. So again, family of four, household income. And again, I only offer this to give you clarification. That's oftentimes two very low wage workers coming together with their income to get to that level. So they're extraordinarily vulnerable, and HUD's absolutely right in using that you know, they're not positions that have substantial sick or vacation time or any of those sorts of benefits. So they fall fast, as opposed to the 100% median, which we can leverage, we can work with, we can help get a payment plan in most cases to get them back on their feet with a small infusion of support. So
Right.
I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. Anybody else on the committee have a question or comment for Alicia or for Steve? Amy, you have something you want to say?
So Alicia, basically, like when you were talking about the 80% AMI, in order for us to have, you know, for Steve's program to work with CPA funds and with the funds that he's getting through you, we would have to have the same conditions that you have, correct?
So the conditions for CDBG CV funds could be applied to the CPA funds. I think it's probably a safe harbor since they're following federal law and federal regulation. And for the administration of the program, I think having one policies and procedures manual, one application, and then allowing VOC staff, I'm looking to Steve, having VOC staff sort of sort out which agency do you bill for that service. And making sure that the documentation that's required by both programs is similar. For instance, we require source documentation from the client. So it's not merely a self-certification of their income level, but we want to see a bank statement, a layoff notice from a job, an unemployment benefit sheet, a social security disability sheet, whatever their household income is. We want to see a copy of the source documentation. And I would think that just for the integrity of the program, the CPA committee would be looking for the same sort of thing, that you don't want your clients to just self-certify their income levels.
But since it's one program, really it has to be one AMI, like eligibility has to be defined.
So the way if I was Steve and I was structuring it from the funder's point of view, the way I would see this structured is that you would put out a brochure, which I believe they already have, that says if your income is under this line for a family of 4, you can apply for assistance. And that income limit is going to be the highest income limit for all the programs that you have. So whether that's 100% or 120%. And then as the client comes in, you, Steve, and VOC staff would figure out which program they would meet the requirements for.
Oh, I see. Well,
so the application and all the submittals would be exactly the same.
Right.
And then there's that absolute upper income. And then so if you're gonna bill the CDBG program, they would have to be under 80% median.
Right, I see what you're saying. But it's possible, I think, for the committee to decide they only want to make people with 80% AMI eligible, even for CPA funds, is what I'm thinking.
Yep. I would think that you'd want to have a little bit more flexibility, though.
Okay.
Because you just don't know people's situations. You could have a family of 4 that both parents or both adults in the household had really good jobs and they had, a large mortgage, and now their income is down by 50%.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in a way,
just to ensure that you're meeting, the needs of the community. I will tell you that on a good day, pre-pandemic, our CDBG funding in the office, we could serve 68% of the city of Holyoke. That means that 68% of the residents of Holyoke fall at 80% or lower of the area median income. That's just on a good day. We can serve 68% of the city. And so I can't even imagine what the numbers are right now.
And that's at 80%.
That's at 80%. 68% of the city of Holyoke meets 80% area median income.
So, I mean, one of the things that I do like about this, and I said it earlier about the CPA, is it seems like we have tremendous flexibility to go to 100%, to go to arrears, to do more than 3 months, to do these things that can help, supplement, the other programs. So, not sure that that's the best use of the funds yet, but that's just, it's nice to know that we have that kind of flexibility and being able to try to help people. Anybody else, any other committee, comments, questions? Steve, Alicia, anything else you want to say? Michael Moriarty, you want to weigh in on anything before we go to the next agenda item?
I would say this is very well covered, and just would again advocate that I think it's a time of real need. So, anybody else, Stephen or Alicia, Steve, you want to say something?
I misread my notes. My handwriting is terrible. The 80% is, I wrote 80, but it looked like a 6, so I read 60. 80% for a family of 4, 68,300. Again, just to give you a comparison as we're talking. So thank you all.
That's pre-tax income, right?
It's gross for CDBG. It's gross income.
Gross income, right?
Gross.
Before any taxes, right?
Yep.
When do we think the eviction moratorium might be lifted? Is there any sense of that?
It's going to be a while.
At this moment, it's October. Do you know the date? It's like October 17th or something. It was a random date that didn't stick with me.
Certainly part of the issue is the backlog in housing court. That's one of the issues that's being considered as well, is that the housing court would just simply not have the capacity to suddenly take on this deluge of evictions. So, and there's no safety nets. Our system is, particularly in Massachusetts, we are already taxed to the max on providing housing and affordable housing. And so I think something has to give. Something has to give. So
So can I ask one more question about that? So first, I guess I have a question around, that means that around mid-October, that's when we would start to imagine, unless something changed, that would be when we would want to make sure this is up and going. And secondly, I guess I have another question around landlords in the city. And how are they doing in light of the fact that, of course, there are many people who are not able to right now pay them rent. And so they're falling into arrears, which is of course bad for the renter, but it's also bad for the landlord.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think our organization is maybe the fourth largest landlord in town. For those of us in the affordable housing arena, we're actually getting our rents in right now. There are enough safety nets, the unemployment funding, use of Raft, and we're pretty aggressive about getting our tenants there if they need it, has got us right now with a very small number of people who are behind on their rent. But we're in the blood from a stone business. That can change drastically in the space of 30 days. It's a little bit different, a little bit higher in the housing market. My sense is the rents are somewhat higher. More people have less access to the resources that are helping them out. And so they're a little bit more squeezed, but not in the kind of numbers that, are going to lead to wholesale evictions in the city right now. The big concern right now is really the loss of that extra $600. That's a game changer. The minute that stops, you'll let 1 month go by and you'll be looking at a very, very different picture with a lot of arrears happening at once.
Thank you.
Anybody else? So thank you. I think that this was very helpful for the committee to have this conversation. As I said, Stephen, we will likely meet in September, but we're also available if something changes and you need us to act on your application sooner than that. Please reach out and let us know, and we'll be sure to make sure probably an update in September would make some sense. If there's an update to have, we'll reach out to you, and if there's nothing new, then you can enjoy your evening. But if there's something changing and you want to give us an update, then we'll give you that opportunity at our next regular scheduled meeting. Okay, anybody else? All right, so thank you. We'll move to, and you guys are free to leave. You don't need to, you don't need to hang out. You're welcome to, but you don't lose any points for leaving.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was great.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so we also had agenda item number 3, a potential emergency application, apparently a threat to Scott's Tower, and Yanni and Mark from Kestrel have joined us. I don't know if anybody on the committee has anything they want to say about Scott's Tower or a potential application, or we want to just let these guys give us an update and maybe provide them with some guidance on what a process might look like, or either later emergency or non-emergency in our regular funding cycle. So Yanni, anybody on the committee have anything they want to add to that? Yanni, you want to give us?
I do. Was there information issued that I missed on Scott's Tower? I didn't realize there was a crisis there. I've been there. It's a very interesting place.
Call it a crisis, exactly.
All right. Well, I'll listen in then. I didn't know if I missed something.
So there was some communication, just to keep up to speed, about the potential for them submitting an emergency application for Scott's Tower, but they have not submitted one. So the agenda item tonight is no longer an emergency application, but
Informational
and a request for perhaps some guidance from the committee on how to deal with what issues, I don't know. They're going to tell us. So Yanni, you want to give us a quick what's happening with Scotts Tower?
Sure. May I share my screen? I made a presentation.
I don't know how to do that. Amy, do we know how?
What I think I can do is make you a co-host, if that's all right, and then I think you should be able to share screen.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see that choice?
Yeah. How's that looking?
That looks
Oh,
great.
yeah.
Good.
Okay. So Kip asked me to be brief, so I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, but I wanted to give just a sense of our project, which is still at the nascent stages, but there's a few different directions it could go. So we wanted to talk with the CPA community committee sooner than later. So my name's Yoni Glogauer. I'm the Holyoke Director of Conservation and Sustainability. The gist of this project is there's 14.5 acres of undeveloped land for sale north of Scott Tower. And the seller is motivated to get it off his hands as quickly as possible. And we feel this is a prime opportunity to perhaps purchase these parcels and tie them in with a larger revitalization project for Scott Tower. So just showing you some quick context within the city of Holyoke. You can see as far as open space goes, it's really close to the center of downtown. Could be an important public amenity. Again, here it is a little more zoomed in. People probably spend time at Community Field. It's pretty well used. This also used to be one park until 91 cut across it, but there's still road access underneath and you can still go up to the tower as we did on a recent site visit. So like brief history, just to show you the historical relevance of this parcel. Purchased by the city in 1923, it used to be called Crafts Hill, and it quickly became an important destination for Holyokers and the broader community. There was a big public works project in 1940 when they renamed it Scott Field and built this awesome tower at the top and other public works projects. And this was really a beloved space for the city until about the 1960s when I-91 kind of cut across, as you saw, and it went into stages of disuse. You know, there were several revival efforts, it sounds like, through the 70s and 90s. There's a swimming pool up there at one point, as I understand it. And then, of course, in 2020, we had our big community field renovation. So that area is now very well used, but Scott Tower is still somewhat derelict. So here's just a view of the current boundaries and the status of Scott Tower. So there's two main parcels to look at. These two, and they're connected through Community Field below 91. And Scott Tower is really at the northern boundary of this. You can still go up this long drive to get there. And here's the cell phone tower that was built in 2000. And the idea was funds from that would go towards park maintenance. Those have mostly been used so far in Community Field for extra personnel, I understand. So here's some pictures, just so you know, real quickly again. You know, the access road is still in good condition. It's used to access the cell phone tower. And the tower itself is in good shape too. There's some graffiti. Some of it's quite beautiful, actually. It's still mostly structurally sound. And there's all these cool public works things scattered throughout the park. You know, here's an old staircase that was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. You can still find old picnic tables scattered throughout. You know, this is like really a gem that, you know, could be like the jewel of our community once more. So here's our project situation. So there's these 4 parcels that are now up for sale. They're owned by Anniversary Hill Development, and they were purchased recently in 2019. There were a few site plans proposed. Most recently, a construction of 200 condo units, but this would have required a major zoning change, and it's not clear if that ever would have worked out. I think by right, it could hold 31 single-family units, but basically, for somewhat obvious reasons, the property owner now wants to sell off the parcels. There's a project lined up at Holy Family Road where they can be built instead. So that work would still continue. But the point is, in order to do that work, the property owner wants to sell off quickly so that he can use those funds. So we think the asking price is around $250,000. That includes the recently assessed property value and other improvements that have been made recently, like the deed survey that was done as part of the proposed zone change. So again, look at the context here. Here's Scott Tower, and here's where all the development was going to go, just on the other side. You know, here's an image of how it might have looked, one of the schematics that was under consideration. And under that proposal, it was that, you know, maybe the community living here could help take care of Scott Tower, and it would be somewhat of a private amenity for them. But I feel like, you know, those of us who are thinking about this project are considering how a development like this would really change the character of the area and make it difficult to see the use of Scott Tower as something for the public at large to be using on a regular basis. So we didn't submit our application yet because it quickly became clear there were a few different options for how this could work. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we're thinking about right now. So first option, you know, we don't want the parcels to get sold to another developer if we want to move forward with this. So one option is to request for all the funds for purchasing the parcels through CPA. And this would give the committee more control over the process and would hopefully ensure a quick timeline, but it would only cover the land acquisition and conservation restriction. You know, we would envision that hopefully this would be a starting point for a grander vision for the park and an overall revitalization. And this would mean those would probably take place through a separate later process. And it also means we wouldn't get any grant assistance for the property purchase just because of the tight timeline perhaps and the deadlines for various applications. But something we're thinking about, you know, something we'd like to also explore is to seek grant funds for an all-encompassing revitalization. So we know we can get up to 1.4 million in grant funding from the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which as of a couple of weeks ago was just permanently funded. There's also the Massachusetts DCS Park grant. And we would think that this would be more of a protracted timeline, but this approach would require that the land would be held for later purchase by the city. So we would need to secure an option agreement with the landowner to hold on to it, which could be expensive in the near term, but if it meant that grant funding could be used for the purchase, it could pay off in the long run. But, you know, to do that, we would have to make sure, you know, everyone in the community and in City Hall and the CPA was really buying into this vision and wants to see that happen. And it also depends on whether they would agree to holding on to the land for us. But if that were the case, the grants that we could apply for would cover much of the land acquisition and park design and upgrade. You know, we could set up a Friends of Scott Tower Fund and Volunteer Corps, for instance. You know, I could see, like, with the public interest in this park being what it is, like, I don't know, donors coming forward with donations in order to have a park bench named after them or something. There's a lot of possibilities. So, you know, again, I've been working on this so far with Mark Wamsley from Custer Land Trust. They've really been looking to do an urban land protection project for a while now, and they've signaled that they would be really into this project if we were. So, you know, at these nascent stages, what we'd really like to know from the committee tonight is some sense of whether we do think this is a project that would garner widespread support in Holyoke. I know everyone here represents different citizen commissions and committees. We have a city councilor on it too, who's not here tonight, but who we'd love his feedback as well. And then we're curious how the emergency application timeline works. So if an option agreement is not on the table and we have to move quickly, what does that timeline look like? And then if you have any tips for, like, what are the elements of a compelling application? You know, I'm kind of new to CPA, and if anyone has any input about, like, what you would like to see in an application to make it most compelling. And yeah, I think this also depends like what's available. You know, certainly funds are much needed now for vulnerable populations, as we were just discussing. So, you know, yeah, I just want to note that Mark Wimsley is here and Rosemary Arnold, and maybe they can help with the conversation that comes. How much time was that?
That was excellent. You did a phenomenal job. Thank you. I'm not kidding. That was spot on. So, you know, Mark or Rosemary, do you want to add anything to what Yanni said before we start deliberating a little bit and maybe providing a little guidance? Do you have anything else you want to add?
It's Yoni. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Put that on the record.
Sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll add a little bit, which I find interesting. Number one, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight. Some interesting points I think about the land for sale. Right now, its general status is kind of a scrubby early successional forest. It was actually, as you could see in that last picture that Yoni provided, it was once cleared. It was really the top of the park where people got the 360-degree view if they weren't going up to the top of the tower. It was the place for picnicking. Gil Woods has mentioned to me it was a place for sunrise religious services. So it was really kind of, you know, an integral part of the destination at the top of the hill. There was already quite an interesting existing trail network on the property. There are old barbecue sites and picnic sites scattered throughout, many of them with views. They would just need to be cleaned up a bit. A lot of the uses that are potential on this property are very similar to what many Holyoke residents are going up to Mount Tom for. And could be replicated right here in a way that once existed, you know, in the city of Holyoke. And just lastly, I find it really interesting in looking over the history. There was a really good article in the Advocate about this property a while ago, which Yoni can share if he hasn't with the members. Really, the heyday of this park was in the Great Depression, and it was a source of pride during a time of hardship, when a lot of people came together to really put this park together and do a lot of work and make it what it was. And you know, when I visited, I'll just add that, you know, I look at it and I say, how can such a wonderful resource be sitting here so close to the city and not be used more? It's a huge urban forest with, I could just see this used by so many people of so many different walks of life in the future. So Kestrel thinks it's a really intriguing project, and, you know, I'll chime in more when we get down to the nitty gritty.
Thank you. Rosemary, you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm of interest to see what the rest of the counselors think, or rest of the committee thinks.
Okay, so I have, the first thing that popped into my head is, can CPA funds be used to fund an option? I'm gonna guess no, but we need to do some research. So Amy, can you do some research upon whether or not funds, or if, do you know already?
Well, yeah, I did some research on that. I have to remember what I found out. I think, oh yeah, what I was told by Stuart is that a returnable option is possible, but that seems unlikely that the owner would agree to that. Oh, also it's possible that admin.
Sorry?
Oh,
Lost Jamie.
She's gone.
Was that Amy that disappeared?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well,
so
we'll get an answer on that, whether or not
yeah, we need to know
that's an option, and, you know, not suggesting that I think that's the right. Can you do me a favor and get rid of the screen save now? I mean, the screen share, so we can, thank you, see everybody. So we'll do a little research on that and find out whether, you know, funding an option is an option for CPA funding or not.
So one thing I can chime in on is that if we do get CPA funding of some sort on this project, and we think it's an important project, we would need it to get further funding. So in many of the grants that are available, most times we need to make sure that CPA funds they're pretty much required.
That was going to be my question, and whether there's any way, if we wanted to move quickly and purchase this outright, any matching funds could be raised from anywhere at reasonable speed. Because I love the larger project. I think the larger project would be wonderful, but we could still do the larger project if we've secured the land already, I presume.
Right. So Mark, you could maybe help me with this, but I think that at this point we could come up with some CPA funding, and then Kestrel may come in. They're actually willing to come in and pay for the appraisal, and they may be willing to come in and help us fund this to make the purchase. And then with the next grant, we could in some ways secure funding to repay some of the due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, I can add, I mean, I think one of the things Amy was going to chime in, and I'll let her interject, is there's a possibility of using, I know it's probably a small account of administrative funds to use CPA funds to fund an option. Whether it would be enough or not, we'd have to see if the option is even possible. I mean, there is a possibility. Well, just to get back to, I think Yoni was correct when he said that if the CPA stepped in right now to purchase the property immediately, it would limit the amount of funds to be able to leverage for the purchase. It's possible some private foundations might want to step in, but the state foundations, or the state funds, they all have their own kind of timeline. You could certainly apply to, say, the state park grant, which is up to $400,000 for improvements, design and improvements after the land has been acquired. But again, the state fund wouldn't be coming in for the acquisition of the land. And I'll just add in, a bit of option two. I don't want to get into too many details, but it is possible. It makes some sense for the city to leverage as much state funds as it can.
Yeah.
And it is possible for Kestrel to come in besides the help with the due diligence funds, particularly with the appraisal, to help with an emergency acquisition, either potentially an acquisition or a help with an option agreement. In order to do that, would really need to see excitement, I think, from the city to make that kind of commitment. This is a big project. We're excited about it. If we see other people excited about it, would be more willing to take some more risk on our part, call up more donors, that type of thing, see what we could really do. But, again, we'd be putting ourselves out there a bit, would want to know that we had backing, in spirit from a broad base within the city, to support, the vision for this park.
Yeah. And I would suggest, from the planning board's point of view, I think we have had some concern about these parcels because, we knew obviously about the interest in putting that condo development in. It's a tough site. And cramming that number of residents in there, we're always happy to see new people in the city and to house them. But at the same time, that's a lot of strain on services. If we can only put 30 single houses up there, it may be a better economic boost for the city if we had something like a really renovated park that could boost the values around it and boost values elsewhere in the city. I think that in terms of getting the excitement around it, one of the easier ways to do that is if you can do the economic modeling and show that, yeah, this would be a genuine boost to the value of the city overall. Because right now, it's just, as you know, a chunk of scrubby land sitting in a place where nobody goes. And I think one of the things about Scott's Tower is that it is not easily accessible now. Everybody knows about it, but you have to go the long way up there. It's kind of a haul. If this went through, from just what I was looking at with your thinking about it, it would become accessible easily or more easily from downtown and from that 141 corridor. And that's two neighborhoods that opens for instantly. And whether that would be enough to really get the public excited about it, I'm just one person. But I would certainly think the potential is there. We're not using that land for anything else. We're looking now at a potential project that's falling apart because it's just a difficult piece of land.
I could add something if I could have a minute or two. When I first moved to Holyoke almost 6 years ago, and one of the first places I went to was Scott's Tower because it's near where I live. And it took me forever to figure out how to get to it. And then I finally realized that if I went to that community park, there's a gated off roadway. And then I realized, oh, so you can't really, I guess that road is still in decent condition.
Yeah.
But to improve access to it, and then to the tower itself is stable, but you'd have to get a variance to be able to access the top. It's got a very tight spiral staircase. A lot of the steps are missing now. You have to step over big holes, or at least you did 5 years ago. But all those picnic tables and all the observation areas, that could become the Forest Park of Holyoke, because it's a park right near the city. And if you could improve access, I don't know if access can be improved by going through where those condos were planned.
Yes, it can.
Oh, okay, because that would
Yeah.
make access, it's a much shorter access drive. And I
Right.
think people would go there because it's the tower's nice, the view's incredible. You look out over top of the city with all those picnic areas and maybe with some minor improvements. I think people would go there. I don't know if you guys have seen Forest Park in the summertime, but when you go there, people have reunions, people have picnics, there are all sorts of activities, there's a pool. It could become the Forest Park of Holyoke, which I think would be a tremendous asset for the city and a big draw for that area. And it would serve as I don't know, auxiliary function to the community fields. Like the cost seems high, but if it was developed properly, I think it could become a big draw and a big asset for the city.
Yeah, I popped in the chat earlier. I think one of the things I've been thinking about in like how you pitch this to folks to gain interest is around how is this different from previous attempts to bring back Scott's Tower, or Scott Tower without the apostrophe S.
Yes.
Keep doing.
You got it.
So I guess it's no mistake that it fell into disuse when the highway was built. And it's not just about access. It's because it means the first half of your walk is really loud and you smell car exhaust, So it shifted the whole nature of how that area felt. So I'm not surprised it fell into disuse because people want to go to nature to be in nature, right? They don't want to be reminded of the big Mack trucks passing 10 feet to their right. So I think a big piece around that land is helping people reimagine it around how it could be redesigned. So that it would feel like that again, versus the highway being this ever-present reminder. Because there are such gorgeous areas as you're walking up the access road. I can imagine having additional access and widening it out would be huge in terms of changing the way that area felt. But I also think in any plan, it'd be interesting to see how they might respond to the highway being there. How do you work with that in order to do what you can to still make it feel like this private nature-based area, even though it's right next to the highway?
You really wouldn't have to get involved with the highway with this piece of property, because with this piece of property, your access, public access, would be 5 minutes from East Hampton Road. It would be the very first, your very first left as you go up underneath the highway is Old Jarvis Avenue. Old Jarvis Avenue, 200 feet up that street, you run into Overlook Drive. Overlook Drive goes right into this piece of property. So it's literally a 5-minute ride from East Hampton Road to get to this property.
Right. And I just meant just in terms of reimagining the entire property in terms of how all of it is coming together, because it was bisected, right? And this was originally this contiguous piece of land that had some integrity, and that's been disrupted. So I think it's important to address how that shifts, what the plan would do to respond to that. But I love the idea of the different access point.
So let me just point out something. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think your highway could be a benefit as well, especially for tourism. Especially in the fall, you're driving right through there, and it's so beautiful in the fall with the leaves changing, the foliage. It's a beautiful area, and I think you guys have a great idea with the Scott's Tower renovation. I mean, and like I said, I think the highway would be a benefit to the city just especially with the tourism, bringing people from out of state in to see that. So.
And so let me point out that Mount Tom is right on 141, and it's like a superhighway, but people access it because it's accessible. And I think for Kestrel, we were trying, I'm on the board of directors for Kestrel, and we were trying to come up with what we could do in Holyoke where we can make a difference to get people outdoors. And how do we reach young families and children to get them outdoors? And one of the pieces is we can't protect any more property because there's not that much in Holyoke. But what there is beautiful historic parks. And if we can bring the historic parks back and make people in those neighborhoods be able to just walk to them and feel comfortable in them and see vista views. I mean, this property, this 14.5 acres next to Scott Tower, was once just a field. And you could see to the Holyoke Range and also to Mount Tom, which you can see in that picture that Yoni put up. And I think that if it's accessible to people by car, they can drive up. If they're handicapped, they can see the vista view without walking up the tower. But having the leverage of having CPA funds gives us the ability to get big grant funding to do a really serious big project with all of our dreams in mind.
Yeah. But I have to say, I love Meg's idea about figuring out how to integrate the highway and get that neighborhood connectivity back. In a way, the analogy that springs to my mind, strange as it is New York's High Line.
There you go.
And, that really made a difference to that chunk of the city. It's urban, but it's accessible and everybody loves it.
Right.
I'd also love to see, we don't really have a lot of family-friendly trails in Holyoke.
Yes.
Right?
That's the
we have the play area that's out, in the Mount Tom Reservation area, but there just aren't that many short trails, and there aren't really any interpretive trails. So I feel like, looking at elements that really will bring families in makes sense, to just add something different than what Mount Tom is already offering.
Yeah, I think it's really important that this is a park and not a wilderness.
There you go. And it could take pressure off of Mount Tom also.
Yeah.
It's gotten very busy.
Yes.
I would say when we saw it, and one of the things I should say, although the top of the hill is very scruffy right now, which I think lends it perfectly, I mean, honestly, from my perspective, to re-clearing it and regaining that meadow at the top, maybe with some shade trees. On the city-owned parcels, the forest is actually fairly mature. There's some big trees. It's quite beautiful. I didn't follow any of the footpaths, but there obviously were a few of them. But also the paved network there is supposedly quite nice. We didn't explore, but I guess there are a number of stone bridges there as well, kind of hidden and grown over on the paved footpaths. And it was meant for people to walk, designed for people to go up with families and walk with strollers. I could easily see two access points, a more accessible point from maybe the new property, as well as maybe bringing cars somewhat through Community Field and going up partway to a parking area and being able to access, so that they can get a little bit distance up the hill. There's any number of ways I think it could be approached, but I agree with that. I think it was Meg who said, I think one of the keys will be, what's the vision for the new Anniversary Hill Park or Scott Tower Park? The kind of the renewed for the next 100 years. Not just, harkening back to this old kind of pride and value to the city, but, really looking forward as well. What could it, what does it offer the current communities and communities in the future?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think there was a question about what the emergency application process might look like if there was a need to avail this project of that process. And again, we have tremendous flexibility. We have an ability to meet on an emergency basis. So, if and we can act very quickly on an emergency application. Probably everybody already knows this and understands it, but the process is if the committee, votes, what we're voting yes to do is recommend funding to the city council. It goes to the city council for final, approval and funding or not. So, there is it doesn't just end with us having one meeting and being convinced that this is the right use of the emergency application, two, CPA funds, and then it would go to the full city council. I think I love Scott's Tower. I think it would be great to to see that park become a community asset. I think there's probably two things that pop into my mind, like what if there's opposition, what's the opposition going to come from? And I think that one is going to be tax dollars. There are members of the committee and members of the city council, members, citizens of the city of Holyoke that would like to see every parcel that could possibly generate tax revenues do that. So that's going to be something I think you should be prepared to address. And the second thing that pops into my mind is, immediate community support, abutters. Like, how do they feel about, this property becoming, a park that's going to, have increased activity? And I'm not speaking for them. I could. It's probably if I'm sitting there, it's probably better than condos, right? But that's not the way everybody. Not everybody's going to share that opinion. So I don't know. I would be prepared for that question. How do the direct abutters feel about this proposal? So, that's. I don't know if you have any other question. I don't know if anybody on the committee has anything else they want to add to the discussion. Any questions? Izzy, what do you got?
It sounds like an awesome idea, and nice seeing you guys again. Sorry for the missing. I missed for like 2 months. Two meetings.
Nice job.
I couldn't find a sitter for my daughter during those times. Right now, she's here just driving me crazy. Yeah, I used to go to Scott's Tower all the time with my friends. We call community field Chamura Park. We used to walk up there and then walk up to the top of Scott's Tower. And sometimes we would go with dirt bikes, ride dirt bikes up there, all the other stuff. It sounds like a great idea. Everything sounds awesome. And the part where, is it Yoni? I want to say, right?
Yes, it is.
Where it's like, either we pay the $250 straight up, or we can bundle everything together and try to get the total amount, so that way we can get everything done all in one shot, which would be awesome, because then we won't be, you know what I mean? You wouldn't have to go around chasing to get the rest of the pieces.
Right.
It's all together. But I guess the question for me is like, if we were to get the property, would Holyoke Parks and Recs be the ones managing it? Would it be DCR? Would it be because Holyoke Parks and Recs now, I think the only downfall for us would be is we're already overextended.
Yeah.
It's already hard for what we with the staff that we have. It's already hard to manage the parks that we already have, and that would be a way larger park and it would need a lot more maintenance. Granted, if we made
Is he going to use it?
Yeah. She's got some input.
Granted, if we made it part of the community field revolving account, possibly there are certain things that could be worked out. But that would be the only challenge to me, is how would we maintain the park moving forward after it's fixed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talked with Terry Shepard about this project, and that's the first thing she said.
I could tell Terry,
like, how are we gonna I love Scott Tower, but oh my God, we're stretched to the limit. Yeah,
that would be the only thing for me. Other than that, it sounds like a great project. Yeah, Forest Park in Holyoke would be great. Like, even if you could add like little things, like little gimmicks, so people could play maybe some picky stick or like kickball or something too as well. So when people come to do their little picnics, there are other things to do too as well.
Right.
But yeah, that was just my piece.
Kip, one of one of the things that you mentioned, though, that probably bears talking about a little bit is that some people are, I mean, I'm in the real estate business. So some people are obviously, very, very cognizant of tax dollars and being able to utilize unutilized property now to the highest degree you can. The reason that this is really a great deal is that the owner of this property has already purchased, or not already purchased, but he already has the contract with the city of Holyoke to purchase land from the city of Holyoke, which is zoned properly for condominiums. So if this is approved, they will be breaking ground certainly within 3 months to build 96 condominium units on Holy Family Road down in the area by the mall.
Which is where we want to
which
go.
will give millions of dollars ultimately in tax dollars.
Yes.
Good point. Thank you. So I want to just add before I forget, one of the things that we are allowed to do is to vote to award funding that is contingent upon any number of matters, and we could do something in this case which said we will fund up to $250,000 contingent upon Kestrel or some other organization or accessing of federal funds to get up to the $1 million or 1.5 or 2. So just keep that in mind, that we do have that ability also as you're trying to develop a strategy for executing this plan. Please keep that in mind.
So I just have one more point to make, and I think that for everybody, it's that everyone wants to live near an open space that's well developed and well cared for. And some of the grant money that we would be going for has potential to put people to work because it's federally funded. So we could come up with some serious jobs, and we could come up with some points where Scott Tower would be renovated and well cared for. And the other thing would be, if you look around, and so many times people are saying it, go to Long Meadow or West Springfield or Agawam, where Robinson State Park, Mittenegg Park, and Long Meadow, all through their whole town, well cared for parks. And who wants to live to them? Everyone wants to come and live in, and so it draws people in to want to live near a really well taken park. And so Holyoke has these beautiful parks, and if we take good care of them, we will draw people to this city.
Point. Anybody else have, I think maybe anybody else have any comments or questions? I guess I would just say, as far as action items, we're going to sit and wait for you guys to come up with a plan and come back to us, whether it's, emergency funding of the acquisition of the property, or whether it's other funding that's getting leveraged off of other things. So, ball's in your court, where, I think you probably get a sense, at least of the committee members that are here, that there's an interest in trying to support what you're trying to do up there. And, our mission is to help facilitate, applications for good projects and analyze them and then prioritize them, which is also kind of a scary thing right now, with the state of the economy. But we do have to spend money in these various categories. With that, unless anybody has something else on this, I think we could move on to our agenda and excuse you guys and wait to hear from you. Anybody else have anything they want to add to this before we move to our next agenda item?
What kind of support, if any, they would like to have from us out in the community? Because this, I realize that it's a big chunk of change and there are certainly other worthy needs, but this could be a real legacy project.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
I
I
This
think, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gil. Sorry.
this also could be, you know, if you think about it, this project would have I think, an awful lot of sex appeal for the city. And I mean, I think that you could, I mean, obviously we're talking to Kestrel and others, but I would think that this would appeal to some of our major employers in Holyoke, that they may very well be willing to take a piece of this or part of this and support this, whether it's immediately or it's as the development goes through. I'm the only person probably in this group tonight that's old enough to remember the sunrise services and the Easter services that were held up there. But I mean, Scott's Tower used to be a real draw for not only the city of Holyoke, but for the valley.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, you
All
know,
right.
if we can help, those of
Right.
us
Let
who
us
are
know.
enthusiastic will help.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for taking the time. So we're gonna move on to another agenda item, but you know, and I see Michael Moriarty sitting there patiently, which he's still a couple more down. So without objection, I would like to, you know, maybe go out of order and
Sure.
give Michael a break on his. Is that okay with everybody? We jump down to agenda item number 6, and then we'll come back to 4 and 5 after.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So Michael, you're on 1 Holyoke CDC preservation restriction. You making any headway?
So, I mean, I've been in frequent communication with the city solicitor's office, and quite frankly, we've gone as far as we can go. We explored in detail the possibility of a memorandum of understanding, even going so far as to have me draft a proposed form that we would use. But then in our last communication, I was told absolutely clearly, not only was that form of a memorandum of understanding not going to be acceptable, but no memorandum of understanding is going to be accepted through the city solicitor's office. As it was explained to me, they see it as a innovation that is not done elsewhere, is not appropriate in their view for historical use, and you know, therefore there would be no form of an MOU that was going to be recommended to the committee. I'm not in a position, and I don't see any benefit to trying to ask a city body, which the CPA is, to try to countermand or argue against the legal advice that you would receive from your city solicitor. That's not appropriate. So, you know, at that point, the MOU concept is gone. I just cannot pursue that any further. As I told you I would, I've been back in contact with my board of directors and with my Flats community group. And I can leave you with this one last gasp. And this really is a policy position that is completely up to the committee. And I, without any hard feelings at all, will accept the sense and the willingness of the committee. There will have to be a restriction. That was made clear. It does not have to be a 25-year restriction. That the term is a decision that the committee can determine, and whether it's accepted or not, you know, is going to determine whether I can accept and move forward with the grant. So basically, the sense from the boards that I've consulted with, I would leave it this way. If it is acceptable to the committee to authorize restrictions that are in the single digits of years, I think my boards would accept that. If we're going into the double digits of years, my boards just feel that this is too small a grant with not a large enough scope for the building for me to be able to accept the grant. If the committee feels that it's got to be in excess of 10 years or it's got to be 25 years, I think at this point, I thank you all for your longstanding consideration, but at this point, I'd have to say thanks, but no thanks, and we part ways.
Well, that's very fair. Thank you.
So, anybody on the committee have any comments to what Michael just had to say?
Well, I think that it is very obvious that you tried diligently to make this work, and I appreciate that work, and I appreciate the consideration and the lack of any attempted pressure to get us to disregard our own legal counsel's advice. Would that everybody before every city board quite so considerate. But I think, unfortunately, that given the way the CPA is supposed to operate, 10 years would be an absolute minimum. So maybe we chalk this up as a learning experience and move on and hope to be able to help with something else down the road.
Anybody else? So, I'll ask the question. Is there any interest in the committee of reducing the term to, I think 10 years probably works, Michael, if that's, single digit, 9, 10, right?
I think I could probably persuade people of 10 years. Yeah.
So my question to the committee is, and I'm going to put it out there this way. Does anybody want to make a motion to modify the terms of the preservation restriction to 10 years?
And this is for which features? Are we talking about the signage, the lighting? Please help me refresh my memory.
If I can back up to that. So the entire appearance of the facade would be reviewed by the Historical Commission when we make any change. The primary work right now is to repair the concrete that is out there. But right
stucco.
Before the stucco rather, yeah. But simultaneously with that, I would be presenting, I think in the first instance, both to you and to the Historic Commission, a rendering of where we'd place the signage, where the lighting would go in, where we'd put cameras, so people would know what to expect before the work happened. And then at any point during the time of this restriction that we made a change to any of that, it would need to be presented and approved by the Historic Commission. That in a nutshell is what the outcome would be.
That seems reasonable to me.
It seems reasonable to me also.
I am not sure where the city's interest comes in is all.
Okay.
We're not getting a long-term commitment on the exterior. I realize it's not a lot of money and that we've put a lot of time on this, but I would say no.
But is 10 years long enough?
Exactly.
Well, that's I guess we as a committee decide whether 10 years we feel is long enough. Like, I'm going to make a motion to approve a 10-year restriction. I don't know if there's a second. Second, Izzy? All those in favor? Well, open for discussion. Anybody want to chime in any more on a 10-year
term? Can I ask a question, like, where does 25 come from?
Yeah.
Right? So, because for me, just like a wider question around, like, what is the meaning? Is 25 just deemed long enough for it to feel sort of like in perpetuity almost? Like, I'm just wondering the purpose of picking that number versus another, and the purpose of moving from 25 to 10.
Oh, I think
Izzy wants to be unmuted.
Yeah.
I just asked him to unmute. Okay.
Yeah.
I can answer that question too, by the way. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, well.
For me, I 10 years, I'm with it with the 10 years. I think the 25 years it's not too much, but it is too much for certain projects, right? For certain projects like Mifa type of thing, where they're gonna use our funds for a bigger, larger project, and hopefully it's a restoration. So 25 years would be like, that makes sense. For the stucco repair, I know I know what the building looks like, and I know the condition of the stucco. 10 years. I mean, if it messed up, let's say if the stucco messed up within 15 years, would they not be able to repair it?
Yeah. Like, what are we worried about?
I don't
Like, are they going to put a giant billboard sign on their building all of a sudden?
No.
Are they going to, use giant floodlights? Like, we're talking about normal stuff.
Is that this is supposed to be a historical restoration to some extent. This benefit to the city is having that facade. And, to me at least, the 25 years is a pretty standard length for Community Preservation Act projects that kind of is worked out supposed to be the community's interest in maintaining that facade, if we have decided that that is a significant thing. But the other thing that I really think we have to think about here is it's a small grant. It's $35,000. How much or how many people are we going to be able to keep in their houses or their apartments for $35,000 in the next 8 months? Is this the right disposition of this money? And do we want to say we will compromise the city's interest in having this maintained for a length of time because it's supposed to be history and the point is keeping the history intact, when there are other urgent uses for the money? If we had all the money in the world and this were not central to the supposed interest of the city in spending this money at all, sure. But it is the time that creates the public interest, or the public interest that is cognizable by the CPA. And we do have very limited funds. And, I think under these circumstances, why would we compromise the public interest to make sure that this particular project got funded?
One thing, Mike, you mentioned there's a community group, right? That's kind of like spearheading this.
Well, more to describe it. It's we call it the Flats Advisory Board, and it's a group of people, primarily who came to our first neighbor circle, and some others they've brought along with them who live in the neighborhood. And what they've been tasked to do is to have monthly meetings to make sure that what we're doing with this building is beneficial to the neighborhood, is designed to be sustainable, and is well, that's pretty much it. To be sustainable and to be beneficial to the neighborhood.
Yeah, and those are extremely worthy things, but they're not they're not the goods that we are supposed to be serving under the historical renovation or restoration provisions of the CPA. That's not what these funds are for. They're not for letting a community group do a great thing with a building. Unless that great thing is keeping the historical features that we're attempting to preserve intact. I'm sorry, I didn't make the rules.
I just don't understand how, I'm still struggling with understanding why like a 9-year restriction feels doable, but a 25-year restriction is not, when like nothing would need to be done to keep up the restriction on your end other than like not doing something egregiously wrong against the standards of the Department of the Interior.
So Megan, the real challenge with that is simply we can't predict what our stewardship of this property is going to be in 10 years, because it really is not like an endowed project. It's entirely conceivable that 7-9 years from now, we're experiencing financial difficulty with this and we've got to sell the place, and the restriction makes it unmarketable. And by the way, part of the reason we got into it so cheap is that problem practically existed for the Portuguese American Club. So I have to, it's just part of my stewardship as a leader of the organization. I have to look at potential problems over the long haul. This restriction has the capacity to create a problem somewhere down the road. That's why.
Back to Mimi's point, it's like the purpose of this category is the historic rehabilitation and preservation of the building. And if your organization is not sure that the building will be preserved in this way for the next 25 years, then really we're sort of using the CPA money to do something it's not intended to be used for, because it's intended to be used for historic preservation and not just for the rehabilitation of a building for economic purposes. Like, that's a great side benefit, which I certainly believe, like, and I'm down for, but only if that first box is checked, which is that, yes, actually, we absolutely will make sure that this building is preserved historically, because that was the purpose of the funding.
Exactly.
Good point.
So,
and I like this project.
A couple of things, and I'm going to start with that one. You know, the committee liked the project. We voted to fund it. There are now competing, applications for funding, but we did, as a committee, recommend that this project get funded to the city council, and the city council, authorize that funding. I don't think we want to make a practice of going back and looking at past projects that we are funding and start looking at, well, now today, would we have funded that? The second thing is, the CPA money is intended to fund historic preservation. And that's what this project is doing. It is repairing, it's eligible for funding. And if we vote for a shorter restriction period, then Michael is going to do that historic preservation, restoration and preservation. Now, there is some risk that it will only, that it'll happen, and that it will only be that way for 10 years. What are we, $38,000? It's $3,800 a year for 10 years we're paying for it. And in the unlikely event that, that 10 years from now, one Holyoke CDC and decides that they can no longer maintain the preserved building in the form that they would agree to the restriction on, then it might change. But it might not change. It might stay the same way for 50 more years. So I think we have to understand that there's a difference between, looking out from Michael's perspective of encumbering an asset for some long period of time with a preservation restriction, and balancing $38,000 against that encumbrance. And one of the things that I liked about an MOU, and I got to tell you on the record, I'm very disappointed that we were not be able to work out an MOU, because the MOU could have given us the flexibility to say that Michael can buy out of this thing and the money could come back. So, but that's for another day. So I do think that there is some merit in approving a 10-year preservation restriction, allowing the project that the committee has already voted, to authorize or to recommend funding to the city council, and the city council funded. And what we seem to be hung up on is the difference, the chances that 11 years from now, 11 through 25, that something happens where, there's some desire to not comply with a preservation restriction. So,
yeah, but consider this, though. It is an important enough risk and a serious enough one that Michael does not feel able to go ahead with this if that risk is not ameliorated. The reason I suspect that the city solicitor's office will not go with the MOU is precisely that the MOU provides the kind of flexibility that effectively would make this a long-term loan to be paid back when almost 10 years in. Sure, there's some restriction, but sooner than you would expect if our interest is genuinely historic preservation. You know, this would be appropriate if we just wanted to get the work done and, you know, treat it as a long-term or at least a 10-year loan. But that's not what the CPA funds are supposed to do. They're
But
supposed
it's not a loan. It's not a loan because it doesn't have to be paid back. You know, if there's no change during the preservation period, then it does. So it's not a loan. Is not a good analogy for this.
Yes,
you know, there are a lot of projects that get funded that, you know, there's buybacks. You can.
Okay,
you know, I'm talking about CPA,
but it is still basically use of our money until the transfer takes place, at which point the money comes back to us.
If
it happens. Now, I understand that we do not know that it will happen, but the point is to allow it to happen, and that is against the goals of the CPA historic preservation thing. I mean, you can vote for it. I'm not saying you can't vote for it, but I think that the reason that we can't do an MOU is that we are not supposed to be using this money this way.
Okay, so anybody else have anything, or we're going to call for a vote?
Can I just say something? Yeah, I agree with what Mimi is saying. Just to remind everybody that this committee voted for preservation restrictions for all private projects. And this committee voted for the 25 years to be the period. I also want you to know that most CPA communities require perpetual restrictions for all private recipients receiving CPA funds. So it's already a little bit more lenient of the way this CPA community is handling it, because you're not requiring a perpetual restriction. And as Mimi says, this is in return for public funds to ensure the public benefit. And that's why we required a letter of historic significance for this, this structure.
Okay. All right. So we had a motion and a second to do a 10-year preservation term. I'm going to call for a vote. So all in favor of approving a 10-year preservation restriction term for One Holyoke CDC and the, what do we call it, Michael? It's not the Portuguese American Club anymore. What do we call it?
Community Building.
There we go, Flats Community Building. So all in favor of a 10-year term? 2? All those opposed? Okay, sorry, Michael.
No, I really appreciate the forbearance and the effort. And, you know, I think this was the first round of Holyoke CPA funding. So a learning curve for all of us.
I agree.
So
thank you.
So let's just leave it there.
All right, Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Rick, did you abstain or vote?
I'm sorry, Rick. He's mute. Is he muted again? Yeah. Can you unmute him?
Yes, I have.
I don't know where I just went.
There you are.
Hi, Rick. I was wondering, I didn't catch, I wasn't sure if you voted or abstained.
I did. I voted.
Which way did you vote?
Against.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that was.
All right. I'm trying to get back on. I don't know what I did.
That's okay.
Keeps happening to all of us.
Yeah, well, the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I was advised to do it because of Zoom bombers, but I can go ahead and, I don't know, I could change it and then just keep an eye on who joins. I'll try to change that setting. So.
Okay, so we're gonna, I have on the agenda as agenda item number 4, the small grant application process. Meg, you sent some stuff out to us.
Yeah.
We want to dive into that tonight. It's 7:53. I
mean, I'm happy to. I think that it's pretty short because it's in line with what we've done in the past. So I don't know if folks saw what I sent out, but I resent out the small grants application that we had drafted last year that I had shared. So that's the same. So if you've looked at it then, it's pretty much the same. The only thing I specified was that the cap for any project as a total budget is $6,000, and that the CPA funding request cannot be higher than $3,000. My main question, I wrote some questions too in the email earlier. So like one of my questions is, would we want to set aside a set of money that we're sort of saying is in reserve? Not that we couldn't then at any point vote to say, actually, we want to use that for this other project because there's this great need this time around. But that we would attempt to put money aside so that we could have applications for the small grants process come in whenever people submit them versus them having to conform to the traditional funding timeline. So if we say we're going to put $9,000 aside this year, then we would know that we would attempt not to touch that money unless we had like a darn good reason to. And at that point, we would just make clear that there was no more micro grant or small grants funding available. But I think the goal is to set some amount of money aside so that we don't feel so bound to timeline, and then we just count on not having that money for other projects. That's one of my questions.
Yeah.
My other question is around, do we want which pieces of the process do we make different for the small grants process? And one of the pieces is it's a streamlined application process. The second piece is that they don't have to do the public presentation because they're not in the same timeline as everyone else. So that part is taken out of the process. And my other question is, would we ask the city council to approve it as a line item so that we would then just handle in-house the spending of, approving and spending of those funds? Or would we want each of those small projects to just go to the city council at whatever that next meeting is, right? And have them still vote on each one, even if they're small, even if it's just $500 or $1,500? Or does the city council not want us to do that because it just takes up more time on their agendas? So I was hoping Mike Sullivan is going to be here because that's like a huge, I want to hear from him as the city council liaison around really what city council would like in terms of the process.
Yeah, and I would suggest that also we might want to check that through the Community Preservation Act Trust Council and just see whether that kind of process where they wouldn't necessarily be approving every single grant is even legal.
Sure. Yeah.
Mimi, did you mean to check with Stuart about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, because normally the city council approves everything, but that would be interesting if
the question
would be doable.
I know that Cambridge doesn't, so there's some precedent. They do that for their small grants application that's underneath individual properties that they like for housing repairs, right? Like front porches, roofs, that kind of thing that they do for some historic properties in the town that are owned by nonprofits. And those don't go directly to their city council. They're approved in-house through a subcommittee that reviews all of them based on criteria the city council's approved.
Yeah. They might have a housing trust, though. That might be I think what they call a housing trust. That I think they have they have a separate thing that deals with that. So that's different than what we have. So.
Yeah,
it's just a question of if we want to set something up like that, or if city council wants each individual project to come to them, even though they're going to be small, right? Just like, how do they feel about that process?
Yeah.
So might I suggest that we also check with a city solicitor to make sure that it can happen, you know, that they can approve a blanket. So let's do a little research. I mean, I love the idea. And if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is these could be like off cycle. These could come in at any time.
Yeah.
Small grant application. So it wouldn't similar to an emergency application, but a small grant application. And then whether we have blanket approval for, off authority of the committee to fund these without going to the city council or not, we can still do that other part of it. And will be the will of the city council, assuming that it's legal. You get city solicitors sign off on it. There'll be their determination whether they want to be involved in the small grants or not. I would
I
recommend
don't have a
not.
preference. I just think it's up to whatever the city council would like in terms of this process. And the other pieces, I did prep some examples that I went through Northampton's small grants process for the past few years, and I pulled some examples of what small grants might be used to fund. So I thought that might be interesting to share.
Yeah.
So for example, I realized actually almost every project, everybody put forward like 6K is our total budget, 3K is how much we're asking for. So that was interesting. That was clearly a pattern. So one was $3,000 for invasive species removal at Raft retirement communities, 2 campuses, including $500 for a public event where they would, get the public involved in invasive species removal. And that included like advertising for that, public day of work, and informational signs on the trail about invasive species. Another was upgrading conservation area identification signage across the entire city, because they had a bunch of different generations of different signage, and some had one logo and some had a different logo, and some looked completely different than others. So they were trying to upgrade all of the signage. Another was Historic Northampton did a textiles exhibit from the 18th and 19th century. And so they hired an expert to come in and figure out how to properly exhibit the clothing so that they could do it safely without potentially damaging the clothing in the exhibition. So they brought her in to figure out how to like properly preserve and exhibit this clothing. And actually to design a program for what the exhibit would look like. So it was actually interesting because it was also a little interpretive in terms of the work she did. And then they also had another small grant for the logo creation for their new trail system. So just like, a small grant for, hey, we want a logo. It's not a huge project, right? But we want to hire someone, and how can we do that? So those are just some sample projects. I noticed that most of them were open space, which I thought was interesting. And then some were historic preservation, but very specific to like a single item, right? A single artifact or a small collection that somebody wanted to give to the city or exhibit safely in some way. The open space stuff was often invasive species work, or it was, very small projects like 2 benches here, right? New signage here. So smaller things.
And Meg, was this Northampton, those examples you gave?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
for the historic artifacts, did they require a preservation restriction?
No.
Oh.
Not that I could see in the way that they shared out the information. Maybe they did, but it wasn't in the documents that they had up.
Oh. Maybe I could contact their staff person to find out more.
Yeah.
So anybody on the committee want to comment on the small grant application process?
No, it sounds fabulous. I think we ought to go forward.
I love the thought.
I would love folks to look at the application that I sent out and just like, am I missing anything? Does the language sound right? What details could be added, or is it too lengthy? I mean, I'd love like just like little detailed responses to the grant, the application itself.
Okay, I printed it out.
Yeah, I sent you the full application too, Meg, so you can kind of compare,
Yep.
So, anybody else? Rick, Izzy, you have anything you want to add to this, the small grant application process? And
I saw that it says recreation, right? So I'm just, so it's open space, historic preservation, recreation, community housing. So those are the categories for the small grants process. So
it would be all CPA.
Okay, so if we said recreation, could like a small nonprofit that does basketball or baseball or just any sport thing, could they apply for like $500 for some odd thing? But it would have to do with historic preservation at the same time, right?
No, not necessarily. But what's interesting is that one thing that is a real limitation is that it has to be a physical thing. It has to be capital. And so like it can't be a basketball, but it could be a bench next to the basketball court.
It could be bleachers.
It could be bleachers.
It has to be a fixed thing.
Could it be a basketball?
No, it has to be something that you can't take with you.
Right, so you can put a hoop up, but you can't buy a ball.
You can't buy that, right? Could you buy like the storage space, have the balls in there?
Yes.
Yes.
That's
But
right.
you bolt it to the ground.
You can bring your
It
your
does,
daughter.
actually. It has to be bolted to the ground. That's one of
Sit
the
on the
requirements.
bench.
It's a BYOB kind of law.
Okay.
So this is, this is, I think this is why Meg was interested in, promoting the small grant application is because, a small organization, a simple application, they can go get $2,000 and put a new hoop up somewhere, and not a lot of bureaucracy, not heavy lifting for those smaller monies. So.
And it could move pretty fast, right? As like,
Yeah.
they could submit it to us, and like, if we have this pot of money, it's just like it's a come as you are, right? It's like as much money as we put aside, that's how much we have to spend this year.
Right.
And so, you come to us and it's a great, so one next step is to create a criteria list. Like, if you meet these criteria, we will fund it.
Right.
Because we're not going to have 8 projects where we're going to be prioritizing against each other. It's going to be like, you've come before me and you're a good project. Check. Here it is. Right. And so I think a clear criteria list is going to be really important for like what would cause us to fund you, where we could like quickly score it and be like, yep, it's higher than an 8, you get funded.
We actually have a criteria list, which I can share with you from the past for evaluating applications that would probably apply to this too. And I think a big part of it would be, again, what is the benefit to the public?
Yeah, please do. Please send that out. So, I mean, and the other next step is, how much money would we want to put aside? Maybe we start small this first year because we already know things are going to be tight, and it's like a first year, we're trying it, we're getting the word out, and then we see how it goes. Maybe it doesn't all get spent, right? Maybe we end up having to run out after 3 months, and then next year we know we have to add more.
So what's your suggestion for dollar amount?
I mean, all I have is Northampton's in terms of understanding what people are asking for.
Yeah.
But most people were asking for the full 3,000. So if we say we're going to put $9 grand aside, and we assume they all ask for the full 3, that means we're saying we're going to fund 3.
3 projects. Yeah.
So it's kind of it could be different, right? But that's all I'm going off of, just what I see happening in the town next to us.
Right. And so let's just say you're the 4th guy in the door who has a good idea for a project for 3,000, but that $9,000 is gone. But nothing stops you from submitting an application as part of the regular funding cycle for that same money. You just have to do a bigger application and be competing with other applicants over, what is becoming, a big demand for money. More demand than supply. So, but so it wouldn't mean that another small applicant couldn't come in just because they didn't get within the first 3. So I like it, Meg. I think you're making a lot of progress. I think we have some research to do about the city council, and I think that's a big issue, but it doesn't change. All it does is add another step to the process. Right? We can still do a small grant application. The only, it seems to me the only question that we have right now is,
we just want to fast track it.
Is it going to have to go to the city council for, and then it goes to the city council, does it get kicked to a subcommittee and then a subcommittee and so it's a way to expedite small grant applications, and that
I would love for it to be able to feel for people like it's like responsive government.
Right.
Like, I determined this need, I filled out this form, I got this money, now
Right.
I have a
Right.
I would love that feeling
right
for people as they experience this process.
So Meg, do you want to follow up with Mike Sullivan and
Sure.
It doesn't have to be part of a committee meeting, to just see what he thinks, and maybe he can take the temperature of the city council as to what their preference would be. And otherwise, I think we could be ready to kick it off 30 days from now, right?
I just wanted to add that I
Go
think
ahead,
that
Izzy.
Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I think that if the city council were open to this, that probably that the way it could work is that they would just approve the whole 9,000, each year for the use of, small grants. So there would still be that process, I mean, it would just be sort of in reverse, but I mean, I'll check with Stuart Saganor that they would approve it, and then this, you know, CPC would decide where to award it.
I would love them to approve the process that we are outlining, and we can outline it in a formal way, where they then approve the $9,000 along with the criteria list and the process.
Right.
Because I think it would expedite it, because otherwise I think these tiny things could get mired in like 3 months of waiting for it to get on an agenda, to the subcommittee, to back to the, I just think like all of a sudden it took 4 months for someone to get $700.
Yeah.
So I would love it if we could come up with a way to do that.
Yeah. Well, if the city council will sign off on it, I'm sure we can find a way.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would love, Amy, if you could talk to the state to see. I mean, it sounds like a great expedited process, but let's make sure it's legal.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a little legal research to do, and then some
Refining of the
politicking with the city council to see what their preference would be. And so, okay, thanks. Anything else? Anybody have any other comments or questions on the small grant process?
It's a great idea.
Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, I just think it's a great idea.
Okay, good. So agenda item number 5, which is the Mifa preservation restriction. So I understand that Mifa has sent a draft preservation restriction to the city solicitor's office. I haven't heard anything other than that. Amy, have you had any communication with the solicitor's office about the acceptability of the Mifa's proposed preservation restriction?
Nothing beyond what our last communication was. I haven't heard any that they've submitted a new addendum than they already tried to submit before, which we were told really didn't fly according to the city solicitor. But they did ask for this extension now to August 20th.
Let's stay on the preservation restriction first. So you haven't heard anything about the preservation restriction from the solicitor's office, Amy?
The last thing was the same thing you heard, which was just what I heard was that they were going to submit something new. That was what you told us, but I have not heard that anything was submitted.
Okay, so what? Okay, so now I'm telling something has been submitted. I think it was a week or 2 ago, and so the update on the Mifa preservation restriction is that they have submitted a revised preservation restriction that's acceptable to Mifa, and I think that they believe takes into account all of the comments and questions from the solicitor's office on the last one. So we'll wait. Maybe you can check with the solicitor's office before our next meeting and find out whether.
Okay, so you're saying they submitted a new PR?
Yes.
Okay, so they've had that for 2 weeks, and we need to find out where it is.
Yeah, at least a week, maybe 2.
Yeah.
But went to the solicitor's office.
Jenna didn't contact me about that at all. So.
Okay. Well, we'll check in, and hopefully it's acceptable, and we can put that issue to bed also.
So what is the next step with Mifa then?
Well, so that's agenda item number 6, which is, an update on the preservation restriction. So if we don't have any more to talk about that, we'll move to other, and we can talk about other, including that if someone wants to. So any other comments on the preservation restriction? Anybody want to?
Well,
there's not much to add, I don't think.
There's nothing to add on the preservation restriction right now, because we'll need to get that back from the city solicitor's office, obviously, with their comments. But Amy just raised the point about their request for an extension, and I don't know whether we should just put that on for the next meeting as an agenda item.
I think that would be my preference. I mean, it's 8:15 now. It's been a long meeting. I think our next meeting is probably gonna, we had a lot with emergency applications in the Scott Tower and the I don't know about the rest of you, but
Yeah,
I don't
no,
think
have
there's
no
anything.
problem with putting that over to the next meeting.
Yeah, let's just, I know it's not even on the agenda. We don't have to do anything but put it on the next agenda, and I'll do that.
I do have a question about the preservation restrictions.
Go ahead.
I'm
There's
not
always
sure.
one.
What's that?
There's always one.
Well, I guess what I'm not sure of is how to communicate and coordinate with the Holyoke Historical Commission, because it comes up during their meetings, and I guess I'm not informed enough. Like, maybe I need to do more homework on it, but it'd be nice if we could have some official communication back and forth, so I'm not interpreting the CPC's desire of what we want to do with the other commission, and then when the other commission has a question, I want to make sure that I give the proper answer. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a hard time really understanding the issues at hand with the different projects, and I just want to make sure that we're not two commissions working at odds, and that we're, you know, presenting a unified front. This isn't I don't think we have to resolve this here, but I'm just saying that it comes up at the other meeting, and I find that I probably need to do some homework and research and check in with Amy before I give them some kind of report. It would be nice if we could prepare a one-page summary that I could, you know, give to Ben Murphy. And yeah, hi Amy. I know that you gave me like a
I wrote something up for you. Did you get to share that? And I also want to mention I'm having a meeting. Ben contacted me for a meeting and to talk about the PRs. And I suggested that Jenna be part of that since she's the one drafting them.
So maybe that's where it is.
Set up a meeting. Do you want to be in that meeting as well?
Maybe that's a good idea, because I am their liaison, and I got tons of stuff to do. I don't know that I'm always up to speed on all the latest happenings and all the, you know, fine details. Your report did go to Ben. Ben did not share it in advance with the commission, the Holyoke, the Historical Commission, and so, you know, didn't really have an update. I think we would need to share with him at least 2 weeks in advance of their meeting, because that's when he issues documents for the meeting. Yeah, so I'm just pointing out that that communication is not as clear and direct as I would like, and I blame myself because I don't know. I'm just not sure how to make it happen.
So maybe our meeting is set for 2 o'clock on August 13th. Maybe you could see whether that's possible for you to do a Zoom meeting then.
I think I can do it tomorrow. So would you mind sending me the invitation?
No,
so that I can jump on.
Ben to do it, but yeah.
Oh, do you want to ask? Is Ben originating the meeting? I can.
Yes, Ben is originating the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll send him an email and ask him to include me in on it, and then I'll do it. I just don't want to fall short of, you know, communication, and just want to make sure that it happens. And I feel like I haven't been doing what I need to do. Thank you.
No problem.
So that's it on agenda item number 6, right? No other discussion or on preservation restrictions. So how's everybody feeling? You want to I'd entertain a motion, and we should try to.
Yeah, I'm tired.
Schedule our next meeting. I mean,
I gotta go have dinner.
Yeah, me too.
So
I may, before we adjourn, I think there's one item of business that Amy mentioned to me a while back, and I just forgot it until this minute, which is, you know, could we, because we know we're going to be paying the Community Preservation Act Association, whatever it's called, the state dues regularly, can we just authorize Amy to pay that bill as it comes?
Yes. Amen.
Motion.
I move that we authorize Amy to pay our dues to the Community Preservation Act
Coalition,
as they come in.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Israel was like, no.
No.
I saw you.
One more thing we don't have to put on our agenda every year.
Right. So we have September 9th. Let's.
That's what I want to talk about. I'm on vacation from September 8th to 12th. So the next time I can do the meeting would be September 16th.
Okay, that works.
That work for everybody?
Yeah. Yep.
What's that, a Wednesday also, I'm assuming? Is that right?
That's a Wednesday, yes.
It's a Wednesday.
So
Before we leave, can we please have space for Rick to say hi to us?
Oh,
Yeah.
Say who he is. I have no idea who Rick is, but I'm excited he's here.
okay. Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
You too.
Rick, I love that you chimed in tonight.
Yeah. What would you like to know?
wrong with you?
What made you want to join the committee, Rick?
Well, I'm a lifetime resident, you know, and I love historical aspects of Holyoke, and if I can be part of that, it'd be great. And I love just sporting events, fields, anything to help the kids out. I want to really be part of that.
Amen.
So cool.
Well,
So glad
welcome.
you're here.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Welcome.
I
Welcome.
appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thanks for your input tonight.
Yep, thank you.
There was something else I was going to say. I forgot.
It was
Yeah,
probably the call for a motion
Have
to
a
adjourn.
motion to make.
I do have some good news quickly, just that it seems like we are on target with collections. I did send an email about that from the tax collector. But, you know, she thinks we're on course with the collections we have so far for FY21, which come to $122,368.34. So that's good news.
Cool. Cool. So, you know, I'm, you know, where are, you know, in our core work, it seems like, you know, we're going to have pending emergency housing application coming in. Everybody should, you know, noodle about that. And how do you feel like, you know, is this the best use of CPA funds? You know.
Yeah.
So one thing that, sorry.
Go ahead, after you.
I was just thinking, like, we currently have $500,000 effectively already asked of us. So one of my questions is, like, if we are approving to emergency applications of that magnitude, are we basically not having an application cycle this year? That's like a formal application cycle at all, because it's using, could be potentially all the money that we really have. We don't know. I mean, the collections are on point. That's good, but like,
Didn't Mike Moriarty withdraw his housing assistance application?
I just meant VOC 250 plus the 250 for Scott's Tower if we went forward with putting forward the money for the acquisition.
We don't have that application yet. Yeah.
No, but just like, I just know it's coming. So, or I think it's coming. So I want to throw out there that like our process could potentially look really different this year as a result of that.
Well, and you know, I think the first question, right, that I had for Scott's Tower was, you know, define emergency for me. Like, help me understand, like, why this, and I, you know, and I get it now. I didn't when I first saw the application, you know, first mentioned, but it's like, it has to truly be an emergency application. This isn't going to, we're not going to allow this to be a way to short circuit the rest of the process. I wouldn't support that, you know. So is it an emergency? You know, I think, and even we could apply that same question to the housing. You know, I think that's different, but it's still, we have to ask that question, you know, does this qualify as an emergency? I think the bar is not very high when it comes to the housing, but you know, we need to ask ourselves that question first, and then we go forward with evaluating and deciding to fund it or not. But
I also think we're in a different place this year. Like, I feel like I'm ready to look at applications.
Well, yeah,
like if we could move the process up, like I'm ready. Like, I don't know what else we're gonna start talking about.
Well, I mean,
I agree.
That's something we can give serious consideration to, you know.
Because we have so many applications from last time that I'm hoping are going to reapply, because we told them we hope you'll reapply.
Well, right, and now you're, as we just described, we have 2 projects eating up all of the money.
Well, that's why I kind of want to now look at them all together versus like fund these 2 first and then like try to have an application cycle when we know we have maybe $100 grand left.
Make that so.
Okay, so let me just clue in on Scott Tower. I think that that there's options here. You know, we don't need to get all the funding, but if we got some of the funding, that would get us to be able to have the requirement of CPA funding. That's what we need.
So, but I think Meg just raised a really interesting point that I hadn't really considered before, and that is, you know, maybe a way to deal with emergency applications is to change our application cycle to now, and you can consider these emergency applications as part of a bigger pile. I'm not saying I think that's a great idea. It's something we should think
we should talk about. Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm sure I would be shocked if the committee voted unanimously on either application under the emergency category.
Right.
I just would be shocked.
And I think it was more of tonight for Scott Tower is more of just having the discussion and putting it out there to see how much support there is, and then how do we want to play that out.
Right.
So it was just good information, great information. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Piece with applications too, if we are able to move up the timeline, we've now gone through this 2 cycles and seen how long it takes to get contracts off.
Yes.
And so I feel like it moves so glacially slow. And part of that's like we're learning, right? We're figuring out the templates, right? We're figuring out everything with the city solicitor's office. But I feel like I would love to be able to get to a place where we're actually releasing funding July 1 versus like July 1, we're still like mired in contracts and we're really not getting anybody money until 5 months later.
Right. I agree.
All right. Now I'm ready for a motion.
To adjourn.
There's a lot to think about.
We have a motion and a second. Anybody make?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So we'll see you on or talk unless we get a request for emergency meeting. We'll talk on the 16th of December.
Okay.
All right. Everybody enjoy the rest of your.
Can you send